Hey everyone, good evening. Roger here from the Expedition Project again. Thanks so much for joining us once again for another one of our live streams. Give us a quick shout, just sort of say that you're reading us loud and clear. Just do a little comment in the box, that'd be great. If you missed out on our last live stream, we've been sort of playing around with a new format that we hope you sort of enjoying, where we have some presentations from some of our projects and then also sort of get to interview some of our guests. Bring in some of our ambassadors and have a bit of interaction with some Q&A. So if you missed the last live stream, please do check that out and have a look and tell us what you thought. Tonight we've got an interesting talk that we're going to be doing, which I'm going to tell you a little bit about soon. But just before we do get started, please do just authorize StreamYard via the link that's on the little top of this video, so that we can actually post your name as well as your comments and your questions as well while we're doing a sort of question and answer session in a little bit. So just if you authorize that, then we'll be able to post your name along with your question. That'd be great. Cool. So I think let's get underway. Let's introduce who we've got going on the live stream tonight. First up, let's say hello to Terry. Hey Terry.
Hello.
How are you doing? What are you up to these days?
Everything's well. So just going to introduce myself a little bit. My name, you gathered, is Terry. One of the ambassadors for the Expedition Project. My current focus, I'm busy with my master's degree focusing on large carnivores, diet competition between all of them. And yeah, really excited for tonight's chat.
Amazing, cool. Thank you so much for joining us. And then very excited to bring in old friend, someone who I've not managed to see in quite a while. Let's say a big hello to Wendy. Hey, Wendy.
Hi, Roger. How you doing?
Good. You okay?
I'm very well, thank you.
It's so nice to have you live and really looking forward to your chat.
Thank you. No, thanks for having me.
Cool. So Wendy's going to do a little chat for about sort of 20-25 minutes, see how we go with that. And then we're going to do some questions afterwards. So get your questions ready during Wendy's chat, and then we can do a little Q&A afterwards and see if you guys have any questions. But for now, very excited and just happy to hand over to Wendy. So all yours. The floor is yours, Wendy.
Great. Thanks, Roger, and thanks, Terry. Hi, everybody. I think I'm doing a slightly different type of talk. And Roger, you'll correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think from a lot of the presentations that I've actually watched from the Expedition Project, you've mainly had a lot of your presenters sat in front of the screen talking. But I pleaded with Roger and said, look, my project is so unique that I actually do need to show some images. So you won't get to stare at me for the whole of the presentation. I'm going to show you some slides, but I do like to be very, very interactive. So I will be asking you questions. So even though you can't necessarily answer me, I actually want you to think in your head of the answer, or if you are sat there with somebody and you're sat next to them and you're there in your lockdown, you can shout the answer to each other. So I still want you to interact, even though you might not be able to shout at me the answers, but yeah, I will be asking a few questions. So I'm going to try and share my screen. Roger and I did try this earlier, so I hope I get this right. Roger, you're going to have to tell me that I have definitely got it up.
Yeah, I'll tell you as soon as you're ready. Okay. Am I up? We're all up and ready to go. Go for it.
Okay, so the title of our presentation this evening, it's a little bit ambiguous. I don't like to give too much away. So it's Animals, Camera, Action. And it's a research project that I've been working on for the last couple of years in South Africa. And I'm going to take you through some of the things that we're doing and some of the findings, and then ask you for your opinions. So firstly, Roger, I just want to thank you for inviting the Endangered Wildlife Trust to do this live stream. I think you know me well enough that I love talking, I love engaging with people, so I really, really appreciate the opportunity. Okay, who am I though? For those of you listening in from the UK, you're probably thinking, she sounds very, very English. Well, that's because I am. I'm originally from the UK. I left the UK about 16, 17 years ago. And believe it or not, I used to be a sports teacher in the East End of London. So my first degree is actually in education, and specifically physical education. And bizarrely, I got to a point in my life, I mean, I've been teaching for 15 years. I got to a point where I'd been doing lots of traveling around the world. And as awful as it sounds to say this, I got bored of being a tourist. And I wanted to go and try and do something different with my life, and not necessarily just go and teach in another country, but to have a complete career change. So I resigned from teaching and I left all my family in the UK. It's my lovely family that are all still back in the UK. And I originally just went to South Africa for 3 months. But there's a saying, Africa gets underneath your skin. And my 3 months then turned into 17 years. Now, I cut my teeth, and this is interesting with regards to the work that Terry is doing for her master's degree. I actually cut my teeth working with large carnivores in the north of the country. And at that time, I was a research assistant working with the Endangered Wildlife Trust. And it was whilst I was working with these wild carnivores and doing a lot of driving around that I started to notice a number of dead animals on the roads. And this is why I specifically said to Roger that I really wanted to do some slide presentations rather than you just having to stare at my face, because it's quite a difficult or challenging subject to talk about without the images. Now, I'm not going to show you lots of images of dead animals. That's not what this presentation is about. It's actually about the positive and how we can reduce animals being killed on roads. So, like Terry, I did my master's degree, and mine was specifically on numbers of animals being killed on the roads and some of the reasons for it. And now I'm busy with my PhD. But just to sort of finish a little bit of the background of how everything slots together, well, when I was working on my master's up in the north of South Africa, that was when I bumped into Roger. And I think, Roger, that was 2012. And here's a picture of me and Roger. I think Roger's got slightly more hair in this picture. And there's one of the project vehicles that I was working with alongside the expedition project. So that's kind of my background and how I ended up here. So I think most of you are familiar with South Africa and whereabouts it is. Believe it or not, sometimes I've done a few presentations, and when I tell people I'm from South Africa, they then say, but where in South Africa? Meaning as in, they don't realise that South Africa is actually a country. They think it's the south of Africa. But to be a little bit more specific, this is actually where I live. I live right up in the far, far north. So basically on the border of Botswana and Zimbabwe in the far northern province called Limpopo. And just a little bit of background about the country. I think it's always interesting and useful to know, particularly for the people who are in the UK. So South Africa, even though it's a bigger country than the UK actually has a bigger population. We have approximately 59 million, the UK is 66 million. We have 11 different languages, and whilst there's obviously only one language in the UK, you could actually argue that some of those languages or the English language does vary a bit depending on the dialect. 9 provinces, it's the 24th largest country in the world, and the road network is almost 370,000 kilometres of paved road versus the UK, which is 422,000. But notice I say that's just paved roads. It's almost double if you include the dirt roads, which South Africa has a substantial amount. And there's a reason why I'm talking about roads, because that's obviously the main reason why animals get killed on roads. So just very quickly, who is the Endangered Wildlife Trust? So this is the organisation that I work for. It's a South African NGO, that's a non-government organisation, and we operate primarily in Southern Africa, so not just in South Africa, but also in Botswana, Zambia, and we do have a number of projects up in East Africa as well. And our logo, this is where it gets interesting, and those of you who have got cats and dogs, this is where you can go and look at their feet. I wonder if any of you know what footprint this animal is, because this is the EWT's logo. So if any of you are shouting at the screen now, this is one of your chances. So this is actually a cheetah footprint for the EWT, and the reason why it's a cheetah footprint is it was a cheetah project, which was the very, very first project that the Endangered Wildlife Trust started with back in 1973. Just so you can see the difference between a cat and a dog, this footprint on the right hand side, that's a dog, and just look at the two main differences. This is just a little bit of a geeky fact for you. The two main differences is to do with that lower lobe. Can you see the EWT cheetah paw, how it's got those 3 lobes at the bottom, and then the dog has the 2 lobes? So those of you who have got cats and dogs, I'm sure after this presentation you can rush off and grab your animal's paw and you'll see whether it's a cat or a dog. And again, I think Terry will back me up on this thing, as she's also doing carnivore work. So that's who the Endangered Wildlife Trust is, or EWT as we're known for short. So at the EWT, I am actually responsible for the Wildlife and Transport Programme, and primarily looking at the impacts of transportation on wildlife. So when I say transportation, I'm specifically talking about roads, railways, ships and aircraft. Why do we need transport? I mean, I think this is a fairly easy question to answer, but just have a think in your head. Why do we need cars? Why do we need rail, aircraft, trucks and cargo ships, or even cruise ships? And the main reason why we need transport is in any society where you want to develop your economy, the transfer of goods and people is critical. And it's a very interesting period that we're all in at the moment with the COVID-19 situation, and the fact that much of our transport systems have come to a grinding halt, and the impact that is having on our economies. So it's just showing that transport systems are critical, but there are negative consequences, particularly for biodiversity or wildlife. So the way we like to think of this is that there are 2 types of negative consequence, either a direct impact or an indirect impact. So maybe just have a little think here in your own heads before I start to show you some of the answers. What do you think would be a negative impact of a vehicle on a road, besides roadkill, which is what I've already mentioned earlier, which was my main area of research? What other things can you foresee being interacting negatively on wildlife? So we've already said a direct impact could be a collision. So in this case, we've got an aircraft taking off and it's flying into birds. And if you think about those birds flying into the engines, potentially that can have substantial damage to the aircraft.